With that, let's start with our testimonies, and Mr. Fowke, you're first.
Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barracio, and committee members, thank you for the invitation to testify at today's hearing. My name is Ben Fowke, and I serve as interim CEO and president of American Electric Power Company. AEP is one of the largest electric utilities in the United States, serving customers across an 11-state footprint. We have a diverse electric generation fleet, and we own and operate the largest transmission system in the United States. This is a significant moment for our country, our industry, and our company. We at AEP are excited about the opportunities and challenges ahead of us as we meet the growing demand for electricity in our regions. Demand for electricity was almost flat for 2 decades. We are now beginning to see this trend reverse, driven by large customers such as industrial manufacturers, data processors, and others who require significant amounts of power. The efforts of Congress to support the development of these businesses have been remarkably successful, and companies are now building and growing here in America because, in part, we have abundant and diverse energy resources and reliable and affordable power. However, in some areas of the country, the demand for electricity is growing faster than the available capacity. Just a few years ago, a large-scale industrial manufacturing facility might require 100 megawatts, or about enough to power 100,000 homes. A facility that size would typically be one of a kind in a region, would be a major source of economic activity for that area. Now it is common for a single data center to require 3 up to 15 times this amount of power for a single site. As technology evolves, power demand from data processing is expected to double nationwide in 3 years. One small example of this demand surge, OpenAI's ChatGPT requires 2.9 watt-hours for a request. Now that's nearly 10 times more power than a typical Google search. AEP currently has requests from large customers that would more than double the existing peak demand we serve on our system today. It took over 100 years of planning and building to create our current system, and a step change in infrastructure investment on an accelerated time frame will be required to serve even a fraction of this future demand in a reliable manner. As demand is rapidly increasing, our nation's electricity system is transforming to accommodate new forms of energy. The pace of this transformation must not overtake the reliability needs of our system. Independent assessments by NERC find the risk of electric power supply disruptions are steadily increasing. Our society depends on a reliable power system. As we embark on this era of economic growth and technological transformation, customers need an energy system that is available to deliver reliable, affordable, and environmentally sensitive power where and when they need it. Continued development of the electric system must be a central priority of U.S. energy and economic policy, and we need to think bigger and more comprehensively to address the many opportunities and challenges in front of us. For your part, we ask that Congress work with regulators to ensure electric system resource adequacy and prevent premature retirements of dispatchable power plants. This includes considering the impact of recent EPA regulations, which could hasten the pace of plant retirements and diminish reliability. Collaborating with Fowke and other federal state constituents to evaluate the establishment of a central planning authority focused on reliability, and directing Fowke to ensure that viable reliability safety valve mechanisms are in place to prevent premature plant retirements. Congress should also expedite the development of new 24/7 dispatchable and clean energy resources to meet the growing consumer demand. This could be done through encouraging Fowke to allow for fast tracking of generation resources in the interconnection queues that have been selected by utilities to meet their obligation to serve customers, encouraging the development of advanced technologies such as next-generation nuclear, passing a siting and permitting package that accelerates the development of critical infrastructure, and maintaining the Inflation Reduction Act and the technology-neutral and nuclear tax credits which serve to reduce costs for customers. Finally, Congress should encourage Fowke's recent efforts to support the efficient development of necessary regional and interregional electric transmission facilities to ensure reliability and accommodate economic growth and development. The electric power industry will play a crucial role in helping the U.S. remain a global leader in advanced manufacturing and technology innovation. With the help of Congress and our federal and state regulators and agencies, we can serve this emerging demand and secure America's role as a leader for generations to come. To do so, we will need to work together to quickly build new sources of electric generation and high-voltage power lines to deliver electricity where it's needed. Thank you.
Are you concerned about the amount of EPA regulations coming out in power plants that you're going to have to be closing more reliable power than what you intend to do?
Yeah, very much so. The EPA is a big fan of CCS, and they think that's the best available technology. As you know, we had a pilot program to explore the carbon capture, and we've got some experience with it, and it has its challenges in front of us, and it's not a proven technology today, and nor is the infrastructure to move the carbon to sequester it available. So while it might be a viable technology, a proven technology in the future, it's not today, and it's unrealistic to expect that it will be available by 2030.
Do you have any coal-fired plants that are being retired earlier than what their time?
We will have to have that conversation with our commissions. They weren't scheduled to be retired in 2032, and these rules, if you don't comply with these rules, you need to shut the plants down, and that would be a premature shutdown.
And also, for the record, on the premature shutdown, who continues to pay? Because your rate was based on the life of the plant, correct?
Correct.
So it's based into the rate that West Virginians and anybody in your system, we're going to be paying for shutting down earlier and bringing on other power too. So it's a double whammy for the most hard-pressed, challenged people, basically. It doesn't make any sense at all. No sense whatsoever, sir. I hope you speak up loud and clear and you put statements out what's going to happen and who's going to pay the freight.
We plan to do just that, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Senator.
Well, thank you. Just to follow up, Mr. Fowke. So in 2021, you testified before a different committee in the Senate that, quote, renewable energy can only take us so far. You went on to say, at higher levels of intermittent renewables, the cost of the energy system begins to skyrocket and the reliability degrades. Still true today?
Yeah, I made that testimony when I was CEO of Xcel Energy, but that statement still holds true because it reflects the physics of the grid. I am a big proponent of renewable energy. I think it's part of the solution, and it's part of how we address climate change and the risk of it. But the reality is, the more renewable generation you put on the grid, at some point that grid reaches saturation point, and then the value of that renewable energy diminishes, and the integration cost increases. And it's the reality that the big grid that we're all part of needs 24/7 spinning mass dispatchable generation. And that's just a fact, and we have to accept that.
So it's dangerous to force all these natural gas and coal-fired plants offline at this point. So,
Mr. Fowke, are you familiar with advanced reconductoring? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there's an opportunity, as we're talking about building out the grid and transmission, the technology is also going to help us with that capacity. Isn't that correct? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a grid-enhancing technology. We actually have just used it a couple of years ago down in South Texas, where we used the advanced conductor technology to, in a 330-mile transmission line of 345 kV. And to your point, it increased capability by about 40%. I would caution, though, that you do have to find specific applications in specific regions and a lot of other technical things before it can produce those sorts of results that I mentioned. But we've been a very big proponent of grid-enhancing technologies, making sure that they also have a cost-benefit, that favorably score out on that. And when they do, we're all in.
Are other countries already using this type of technology, advanced conductoring?
Or other utilities?
Countries.
I believe so, but I'd have to check with my team to see how extensively they are.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And now we have Senator Cassidy.
Mr. Fowke, the chairman just reminded me, do y'all still have that coal-fired plant in Shreveport, Louisiana, or did y'all shut that down?
I believe that has been shut down.
So the chair just reminded me, my ratepayers in Louisiana are still paying for that.
Absolutely.
Because it did not go to its life. So when we speak about higher energy costs, and they've risen significantly during this administration, part of that is the kind of unrealized productivity of sunk assets. And let's be clear, that's regressive. That is regressive. Poor people pay a greater percent of their income for this unrealized potential. But I will note, by the way, in Northwest Louisiana, you guys in CLECO, I think, supply that area, and y'all have great reliability. So I just also want to give you a congratulations, a shout out. Our state consumes a lot of energy, and you guys are providing reliable energy, so I appreciate that. Let me ask you this. I recently toured Sempra, building a little bit off of Senator Cortez Masto, Sempra in Southern California, and 100% of their electricity right now is being supplied by renewables. You just got to hand it to them. It's remarkable. Now, I don't think of Southern California as being huge in manufacturing, but there's more than I thought there was. Now, they admitted in another time of the year it would have a mix. But just to say this kind of load balancing, it is possible, correct? I mean, as much as I believe in fossil fuel and the necessity for base load, in a place like Southern California with lots of renewables, et cetera, it's certainly possible, correct?
I will tell you, in all sincerity, they're connected to a big grid that somewhere has that dispatchable 24/7 likely fossil fuel that is supplying them. And you can stream renewables from different places, but at the end of the day, they're still connected to grids that have fossil capability on that.
So I was struck that Micron located downstream from a nuclear power plant. And that was one of the reasons you did there. Somehow I think state subsidies had a role to do with it, but that's okay, we'll leave that. So for that, always got to be on, even if you're like this great utility in Southern California in which at that time they were using 100% renewables, you still got to have that base load.
Absolutely. And, that nuclear power plant is not, I assume, is not behind the meter at Micron. It's on the grid. So it's supplying resources, to the entire grid for the benefit of many customers, not just Micron.
Okay, thank you.
What's the discrepancy here in terms of the forecast, whether it's from EIA or the RTOs? Is the problem in how they're collecting the information, their forecasting issues? We've got to get a better handle on what's coming down the pike here. What do we need to do?
Well, I don't know where EIA is getting their information. That sounds like a forecast that maybe would have been accurate 4 years ago, but not with what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Not with what we're seeing in today's world. I mean, in Central Ohio, we're going to double our capacity in 5 years. And we've talked extensively about the amount of demand we're seeing. I think one thing that has to happen within the RTO structures is it's incumbent upon us as a utility to get the updated forecast in a timely manner so they can have full information.
Do you think that they're collecting the right data in order to give you a forecast that is accurate?
Well, the RTOs typically collect their data from their members. So we need to tell them how much load we're seeing.
Right.
And then, of course, there's a risk adjustment process and how much of that's actually, serious, how much maybe it's duplicate, et cetera, et cetera. But we're working very closely with them to get those forecasts right. And they're recognizing it. And you're starting to see it, Senator, in what's happening, the pricing of capacity, for example, in the PJM market. It's a 3-year capacity window does not encourage capacity that needs to be built for a 30-year time frame.
Mr. Fowke and I have known each other for many years, well back into my gubernatorial days. AEP testified last year before FERC that you're being asked to connect loads across the transmission system footprint equal to roughly 10% of the total U.S. electricity demand today. And earlier this month, DOE released that preliminary list of national interest electric transmission corridors. And many of these, primarily designated areas, fall within AEP's service area. So how would that final designation of these high priority areas make it easier for you to access new transmission infrastructure and connect new generation? How much of the work has been done?
Yeah, first, good to see you again, and we're very supportive of the Big Wires Act, by the way, and want to continue to work with your staff on that. As far as the national corridors, at AEP, we've had a tremendous amount of success working with our states to get transmission sited, and I think we've had to use eminent domain in less than 3% of the circumstances. So I think what's important, what the national corridors bring, which FERC doesn't have the ability across the full grid, is in those rare cases where we need a federal backstop to step in, when it's a critically important transmission line for reliability. That's where I think FERC today only has that authority in these national corridors. So that to me is the bigger thing than having a national corridor, in my humble opinion, because states should be leading the siting process. I think they're critical in that process.
Totally agree. Great. Thank you all. Appreciate your, I'm out of time, but I might come back for a second round of questions.
But seriously, let me start with Mr. Fowke, and it was serious, but I did want to welcome you. Mr. Fowke, in your testimony, you say that EPA has finalized new power plant sector regulations, and I quote, which could hasten the pace of plant retirements and diminish reliability, end quote. At the same time that FERC is saying we expect to, we need to increase electricity over the next 5 years, increase it. So don't we need to be focusing on dispatchable resources 24/7 to provide this additional electricity? I mean, it's not going to magically appear out of thin air, right? So aren't we on the wrong track, and don't we need to have EPA work with our baseload industry to make sure we can meet our electricity needs, and we're not like some third world country with blackouts and brownouts, which have already started to happen?
Yeah, I agree with you. I love seeing renewables on the grid, but you cannot substitute 24/7 dispatchable generation. And in fact, if you look at the queue right now, the generation queue, it's, I think, 2.6 terawatts, which is more than double the existing capacity we have on our system. But if you look what's in those queues, Senator, over 95% of it is non-dispatchable generation.
What was the percent?
Over 95% of it is less than 5% of it is dispatchable 24/7 generation. So we absolutely need to hang on to what we have.
I heard you the first time. I just wanted to make sure everybody else did too.
We absolutely need to hang on to what we have. And the EPA rules will, I believe, will hasten the retirement of the dispatchable generation we have on our grid today.
Okay, who wants to disagree with them and why? Let the record show that nobody disagrees. I think that's pretty important.
Mr. Fowke, how do we get there? I guess I'll go back to my original question. Do you believe we have to address the threat of climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot we can do, but we also have to balance that against the need for reliable and affordable power. And we need to, I've spoken many times about this in my former role, and I'll say it as just as somebody that's in the industry. This industry can make tremendous strides to reducing carbon emissions and already has, more than we probably ever thought possible. But that last, you picked a percentage, that last 20% is going to require different technologies than we have today. I'm a big believer.
For example, small modular reactors.
You just took the words out of my mouth, Senator. I'm a big proponent of that. Maybe carbon capture becomes viable. It's not now. Maybe there's something else, but we have to have technology move at the speed of value, and I worry that when we prematurely shut down power plants that are running, that is going to have a very negative impact on reliability and potentially the ability to fund this terrific growth that we're seeing across the country.
Do you agree, though, that the queue is a barrier in itself in terms of what's waiting in line?
Yes, I do, and that's why we think that FERC should be encouraged to fast-track those resources that load-serving entities that have the obligation to serve feel are essential to preserve reliability. We don't have that today, Senator.
For Mr. Fowke, you described how new data centers could require 3 to 15 times as much power as a more typical industrial plant. Do you think states and utilities should require data centers with such a new demand for power to install energy storage on-site in order to shave back their demand for power from the grid at periods of peak demand?
I think that's an interesting commentary, and it's something we need to look into. I mean, traditionally, and I refer to my colleague, data centers are backed up because of the importance of making sure you have backup power. But I think increasingly, as we look around, I think data centers are more open to doing exactly what you described. I also would want to call to your attention the data center tariff that we filed in Ohio, recognizing that this extraordinary growth needs to be funded fairly by the data centers and not cost shifting to other consumers. We think it's a critically important first step as we move forward with the data center demand we see from the data.
I agree.
But again, your expertise means an awful lot to us, and I want to thank you for that. And what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, but we're going to have members, we'll have until the close of business tomorrow to submit additional questions for the record. So with that, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.